At some point in human life, almost everyone experiences it. A simple moment, standing in front of a mirror, wearing a certain outfit, and something feels different. Not in the outside world, but inside yourself. The way you stand changes slightly. The way you walk feels more stable. The way you look at yourself feels more direct. As if another version of you quietly steps forward, calmer, stronger, more confident. And you might wonder, why does clothing have this effect on the human mind? Why can something made of fabric, color, and shape change the way we feel about ourselves? To understand this, we cannot just look at clothing. We need to look at the human mind and how identity is constructed within it. Because clothing is not just physical material. Clothing is a signal, a language without words, a social message sent before we even speak. From the earliest stages of human history, clothing was never just protection. It was always meaning, status, identity, role. Even in ancient human groups, long before complex language existed, people already used visual signals to communicate position and identity.
Body decoration, animal skins, symbols, colors. All of these were early forms of saying, this is who I am. This is my place in the group. And although civilization has changed, the human brain still operates with the same ancient system. We are still deeply sensitive to visual signals. Because evolution trained the brain to make fast judgments about others. In less than a second, the human brain can evaluate someone. Are they confident? Are they competent? Are they trustworthy? Are they powerful? And one of the first things the brain uses to make that judgment is clothing. Without realizing it, clothing becomes a shortcut for social interpretation. And this is where everything begins. When you wear a certain outfit, your brain does not just see fabric. It instantly activates associations. A formal suit may trigger concepts like professional, capable, structured, authoritative. Casual clothing may trigger different associations. Relaxed, comfortable, free, unpressured. And these associations do not stay as thoughts. They become feelings, because the human brain does not strictly separate what we see from how we feel about what we see. Everything merges into subjective experience. And this is where the first psychological effect appears, a phenomenon known as enclothed cognition. The idea that what we wear can influence how we think, feel, and behave. Not because clothing has power, but because meaning has power. When someone wears a suit, for example, the brain does not only register clothing, it activates an identity framework, a competent person framework, a responsible individual framework, a high-status behavior framework. And without conscious awareness, behavior begins to adjust to match that identity. Posture changes, speech becomes more controlled, thinking becomes more structured, decision-making becomes more deliberate, because the brain is constantly trying to align behavior with the identity that is currently active. But there is a deeper layer beneath this. Confidence is not just mental. It is also physical. The body and the mind are not separate systems. They are constantly communicating. When you feel confident, your body changes. And when your body changes, your mind responds. This creates a feedback loop, a continuous cycle between physical state and psychological state. When you wear clothing that feels right for you, your body begins to respond. Your shoulders open slightly. Your steps become more grounded. Your movements feel more controlled. Your gaze becomes steadier. And the body sends signals back to the brain. I am safe. I am prepared. I am in control. And the brain strengthens the feeling of confidence in response. At the same time, something else is happening outside of you.
other people begin to respond to you differently. And this is one of the most powerful but unknown aspects of confidence. Humans are deeply social creatures. We are constantly influenced by how others treat us. When you wear a certain outfit, people may react with more respect, more attention, more trust, more seriousness. And every social reaction becomes feedback for your brain. The brain then interprets, I am being taken seriously. I am valued. I belong here. And this strengthens confidence even further. However, this effect is not dependent on price or luxury. It is not about expensive brands. It is not about status symbols. What truly matters is meaning. Because the human brain does not operate on objective logic. It operates on association and memory. A simple outfit can have a powerful psychological effect if it is connected to meaningful experiences. A moment of success, a moment of recognition, a moment of strength, or a moment where you felt like the best version of yourself. The brain stores all of these experiences as identity markers. So when that clothing is worn again, it reactivates that version of the self, like reopening a mental file. But there is something even deeper happening. Confidence is not purely internal, and it is not purely external. It exists in between. Clothing acts as a trigger, a switch, a psychological doorway, not into someone new, but into a version of yourself that already exists, just not always active. And when that doorway opens, behavior begins to shift. Speech changes, posture changes, presence changes. And from these small shifts, something larger emerges: confidence. But there is a paradox here. If confidence becomes too dependent on external clothing, it becomes fragile because it relies on external conditions. However, when we understand that clothing is only a trigger, not the source, we begin to see something important. Confidence is not created by clothing. It is activated through it. This means confidence already exists within us. It does not need to be built from nothing. It needs to be accessed. Clothing becomes one of many keys, but not the only one. Because humans are complex. We do not live only in thought. We live in perception, in social interaction, in memory, in emotion. And in that complexity, clothing becomes a bridge, a connection between internal identity and external expression. But there is another layer still. The human brain is deeply symbolic. It does not just process reality, it assigns meaning to it. Which means clothing is never just clothing. It is a symbol of identity in motion, a reflection of how we want to be seen and how we want to see ourselves. And over time, the brain learns from repetition. If a certain outfit is worn during moments of strength, success, or recognition, the brain begins to associate that outfit with capability. And every time it is worn again, that association becomes active. Not consciously, but automatically. This is why some people have lucky outfits, or clothing they wear for important events, because the brain has attached emotional memory to it. And emotion is what strengthens identity. But at the core of everything, one truth remains. Clothing does not create a new version of you. It reveals a version that was already there. Sometimes hidden, sometimes quiet, sometimes waiting. And when that version appears, even for a moment, it feels like transformation. But it is not transformation. It is recognition. A reminder that identity is not fixed. It is flexible, layered, responsive, and deeply influenced by how we perceive ourselves in the moment. And clothing is one of the simplest ways the brain changes that perception. A small external shift,
that leads to a powerful internal change. And perhaps that is why something so simple can change how we feel about who we are. Because in the end, confidence is not something we wear. It is something we access. And clothing is just one of the many doors that leads us there.